working to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching ASEAN in Focus. On tonight's headlines. The Philippine economic growth beat expectations in the third quarter despite soaring inflation, spurred by an increase in household spending as people get back to pre-pandemic life. GDP grows 7.6%, beating expectations of 6.3%, as well as the 7% growth seen in the same quarter last year. The Philippines and Cambodia agreed to strengthen collaboration in various fields such as agriculture and digitalization. Russian President Vladimir Putin will not attend the G20 Leaders Summit on the Indonesian resort island of Bali next week, according to the embassy's chief of protocol, confirming this, and that Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov will instead lead the Russian delegation to the G20. However, President Putin's program is still being worked out, and that the spokesman said he could participate virtually. Canadian Foreign Minister Melanie Joly called out an increasingly disruptive China on the world stage as she teased in a speech parts of a new Indo-Pacific strategy expected to be released this month. First in our news, the Philippine economy grew by 7.6% in the third quarter of this year. According to the Philippine Statistics Authorities, the 7.6% growth reported in the July and September period is faster than the 7.5% growth reported in the second quarter. Take a look.
Ang Gross Domestic Product o GDP ng Pilipinas ay nagtala ng pagtaas na 7.6% sa ikatlong quarter ng taong 2022. Ito ay mula sa naitala na 7.0% sa parehong quarter noong nakalipas na taon. Ito ay pang-anim na consecutive quarter na paglago ng ekonomiya mula sa ikalawang quarter ng taong 2021. Ang Gross National Income o GNI ay nagtala ng pagtaas na 10.5% sa ikatlong quarter ng taong 2022.
The third quarter's GDP exceeded the median analyst forecast of 6.3%. This turnout puts us second in growth in the ASEAN region, behind Vietnam's 13.7%, and in front of Indonesia's 5.7%. On a seasonally adjusted quarter-per-quarter basis, our economy grew by 2.9%, signifying our solid posture against current domestic and external risk. With this, we are on track to achieving the government's growth target of 6.5 to 7.5. While these developments are remarkable, I want to underscore that our nation still faces a considerable burden in the form of high inflation due to heightened external risk in the brunt of recent typhoons. And as stated by President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., this administration's objective is to reduce poverty to single-digit levels, which requires managing inflation. Ensuring that Filipino families have an adequate food supply is our top priority. To stabilize the rising inflation and protect the purchasing power of Filipinos, especially the vulnerable sectors of the economy, the government is providing cash transfers, fuel discounts, and other forms of targeted assistance. We are also considering the extension of Executive Order Number 171, which significantly reduces tariffs on rice, pork, and corn, thereby enhancing food security while food prices remain elevated. We recognize that the more robust solution is to boost domestic agricultural production. We will do this through more investments in the food value chain and research and development to enhance farm productivity and improve the efficiency of post-harvest processes. Getting government to facilitate private investment in marketing infrastructure, including storage, transport, and logistics, is crucial to achieving durable food security. To sustain agricultural productivity and resilience, the government will continue implementing climate-adaptive technologies and further strengthen our value chains.
The surprising performance was driven by increased spending on restaurants, hotels, and travel, as well as investment as schools restarted face-to-face classes and COVID-19 restrictions were lifted. However, Mr. Balisacan warned the country faced a considerable burden from high inflation and the impact of recent tropical storms that badly damaged crops. Inflation hit 7.7% in October, the highest in nearly 14 years due to surging food prices. Like central banks around the world, the Philippine monetary policy makers have flagged further interest rates where needed to tame inflation. President Marcos arrived in Cambodia to attend the 40th and 41st ASEAN summits and related summits. Take a look. It will be Marcos's first time to attend the Asian summit since assuming the presidency in June. In a pre-departure speech before boarding his flight, President Marcos said his participation in the ASEAN summits will promote and protect Philippine interests in ASEAN. He also said he and fellow heads of state will also address regional issues such as the pandemic, the situation in Myanmar, developments in the South China Sea, and the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, among other important matters. The president noted that he will also be having bilateral meetings with some of his counterparts in ASEAN and ASEAN's dialogue partners. He also said he will also be looking forward to meeting the Filipino community in Cambodia. Likewise, President Marcos said his participation in the ASEAN summits will be a very good opportunity for the Philippine government to forge new partnerships. Let's listen in.
Leaders of ASEAN member states will discuss and provide policy decisions on current political, security, economic, and socio-cultural developments, as well as global issues that are affecting Southeast Asia and this region and beyond. We will also hold summits with ASEAN's dialogue partners, including Australia, Canada, China, Japan, India, the Republic of Korea, and the United States, to review existing and new areas of cooperation and exchange views on the regional and international issues. And we will also be having bilateral meetings with some of my counterparts in ASEAN and ASEAN's dialogue partners. I will seek further cooperation in key priorities of my administration, as well as how to explore what we can do to come together to address the most pressing issues of the region. I have spoken often about the importance that I put to the partnerships that we make as we go forward and start to live the future of the new global economy. And I think this is going to be a very, very good opportunity for us to forge new partnerships and to strengthen those that have already existed for very long time. And it is also an important ASEAN conference, specifically because this is the first time ASEAN has been able to meet after about 3 years.
The Philippine government is on the right direction to ensure the country's strong economic recovery, according to President Marcos today, as he wooed Cambodian businesses to invest in the country. In a roundtable meeting with Cambodian business leaders in Phnom Penh, the president said the country's economic figures are a testament to its sustained growth momentum. Data from the National Economic and Development Authority showed that the Philippine economy grew by 7.6% in the third quarter of this year, faster than the 7.5% reported recorded in the second quarter of this year and the 7% posted in the third quarter of 2021. While he acknowledged certain external challenges, President Marcos noted that the Philippines still has many investment opportunities for foreign businesses. The president also assured Cambodian investors of a conducive regulatory environment, citing the policies and procedures his administration are implementing to ensure the success of public-private partnerships as well as government-to-government partnerships. Touting the recent Philippines economic achievements, the president stressed the improvements in the country's labor market, with the unemployment rate settling at 5% in September, the lowest record since the onset of the pandemic. The president guaranteed that foreign business and investors would experience a different economic transformation as the country is on track towards strong recovery. Meanwhile, the Philippines and Cambodia also agreed to strengthen collaboration in various fields such as agriculture and digitalization. They identified areas of cooperation between the Philippines and Cambodia include agriculture, merchandisation and food processing, micro, small and medium enterprises or MISMES, energy and low-cost housing. Collaboration in elderly Medicare was also identified, particularly the hiring of Filipino nurses. Tie-ups on garments and traveling bag manufacturing were also mentioned, in addition to digitalization for ease of doing business as well as rice importation. The president had a CEO roundtable in Cambodia today where he invited Cambodian businesses to come to the country, especially now that the world recovers from the pandemic. Meanwhile, Ukraine signed the instrument of accession to the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation in Southeast Asia today. ASEAN said Cambodia is committed to peace as this is the way to economic growth. Take a look.
We always believe that peace is the foundation for growth. And one of the most important factors that ASEAN continue to strive, even in difficult times, is because we have relative peace stability in the region. While it is of utmost significance that we are trying to help our partners in bringing about a peaceful solution to the conflict there, I should also highlight that we also feel the impact of the war. Food security suddenly becomes one of the most important topics. And then there's also disruption to the supply of global energy. Inflation becomes a big issue for many countries, and now in order to curb inflation, many countries are also introducing higher interest rate. And all of this will dampen our effort to, recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. I have to say is that, shortly after the COVID-19 outbreak, we've been putting in place some of the measure and policy and framework to help us to address all of this matter. But then only a year or something, I can say that some of our member states managed to contain the situations, and now we can kind of bring some normalcy to our society, and our economy start to grow. But then with this impact, I think we have to also be mindful of the challenges that we are going to face in the coming months or year. According to some estimate, there's more concerns now that it is possible that next year we will face global recession, and that's not good for anyone. And that will reverse all the efforts or the achievement that we made, since we reopened our economy. And then it's going to also undermine our efforts and ability to make sure that we are going to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal by 2030. So again, the best way forward for all of us here is to end the conflict there peacefully and as soon as possible.
A total of 50 parties have now joined ASEAN's Peace Pact. China, India, and the United States, the European Union, and Russia are among its other signatories. The key principles of the treaty are mutual respect for independence and territorial integrity, the settlement of disputes by peaceful means, and the renunciation of the threat or use of force. Ukraine's accession to the treaty was seen as a sign of support for Ukraine. On November 9, the 14th ASEAN Coordinating Council Working Group on Timor-Leste's application for ASEAN membership was also held in Phnom Penh. Timor-Leste gained independence in 2002. Since 2011, it has sought to become a member of ASEAN. However, the country must improve its economic and political situation to be eligible for membership. Since the 2017 general election, when a minority government was formed, the country's political situation has become volatile and uncertain due to a power struggle among political actors with constitutional authority to govern. Consequently, it has impacted economic development and diverted government attention from addressing the most critical challenges in economic development, such as sustainable development, inclusive growth, economic diversification, and job creation. Timor-Leste is the only country in Southeast Asia not yet a member of ASEAN. Besides its geographical location and cultural similarity, Timor-Leste is enthusiastic about joining ASEAN because it will provide access to the ASEAN market of 650 million potential customers, which will help the country's economy to grow. In tonight's other news, Financial Secretary Paul Chan told top global finance leaders that Hong Kong is confident in developing into a leading center for green and sustainable finance and for fintech. In a keynote speech at the Global Financial Leaders Investment Summit, Chan said the opportunities Hong Kong offers to the world as an international financial center are boundless. Take a look.
Along the global momentum, Hong Kong has this vision to become a premier center for green and sustainable finance that serves the green transformation in the mainland, the region, and the world. On this, we have much confidence. The National 14th Five-Year Plan supports Hong Kong's development into a green finance center. In particular, Hong Kong's strategic position in the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Greater Bay Area, where green transition is high on demand for this burgeoning 11-city region with a population of 86 million. Adherence to high international standards is also why we have good prospect to succeed. We have reporting and disclosure standards that align with international best practices. We are seeking to adopt a green classification framework along the common ground taxonomy. Green bonds issued in Hong Kong are trusted by global investors. The virtual asset policy statement mentioned earlier sets out our vision, regulations, thoughts on investor protection, and attempts in emerging areas such as NFT tokenization and e-Hong Kong dollar. As an IFC, Hong Kong is open and inclusive towards global innovators. We are working with the financial regulators towards providing a facilitating environment for the sustainable and responsible development of the virtual asset sector in Hong Kong.
Now, Chief Executive John Lee also earlier said that Hong Kong was ready to work with the 15 members of RCEP and that they had welcomed the possible inclusion. Economic analysts see the presence of Hong Kong in the free trade bloc as a boost to the ASEAN economy. ASEAN has been Hong Kong's second biggest trade partner since 2021, with trade volume reaching over $160 billion in 2021, according to the administration. RCEP has 15 members, with the 10 ASEAN member states and 5 partners: Australia, New Zealand, China, Japan, and Korea. It covers about 28% of global trade, 30% of global GDP, and nearly 30% of foreign direct investment. City leader John Lee also said that Hong Kong won't scrap its policy of placing limited restrictions on new arrivals, but it will implement special rules to host big international events. He said more activities with an economic and international element would be held under specific plans. Let's take a look.
while we can balance the risks against economic and social needs, we will try to have special plans to allow activities to proceed with what we consider acceptable restrictions. And it is under this principle that the Rugby Sevens was conducted, which was a very successful event. And I think the international world has seen that Hong Kong has come back to the center stage for international activities. And I think 0+3 has served the purpose of Hong Kong to the acceptable and anticipated extent, allowing a lot of activities to happen. And I've also indicated that the statistics indicating arrivals and departure at the airport is positive. There are more and more people coming to Hong Kong from overseas that we will be making special arrangements while we can control the risk. And I really wish the public to know that while we look at the data, we also have to look at what safety factor we have to build in the overall strategy to protect against COVID's attack.
Hong Kong maintains layers of pandemic restrictions long since abandoned by almost everywhere else in the world. Overseas arrivals are still banned from going to bars and restaurants for the first 3 days and must test regularly. While the requirement puts an imminent influx of foreign guests out of reach, Mr. Lee touted the benefits of ending the previously required hotel quarantine in a policy now known as 0+3. Russian President Vladimir Putin will not attend the G20 Leaders Summit on the Indonesian resort island of Bali next week. That is according to Moscow's embassy in Indonesia today. And Yulia Tomskaya, the embassy's chief of protocol, confirmed that Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov will instead lead the Russian delegation to the G20. However, she said President Putin's program is still being worked out and he could participate virtually. First, let's listen in.
Kepala negara, pemerintahan yang akan hadir. Beberapa hari yang lalu saya juga sudah bertelepon, berbicara lewat telepon dengan Presiden Putin dan Presiden Zelensky. Beliau menyampaikan akan hadir kalau kondisinya memungkinkan. Tapi kalau enggak nanti misalnya seperti kemarin Presiden Zelensky mungkin akan minta virtual. Yeah.
U.S. President Joe Biden, who has called Putin a war criminal and who will be attending the summit, previously said he had no intention of meeting Putin in Bali if he went. Host Indonesia pursues a neutral foreign policy and has rebuffed Western calls to disinvite Russia from the summit. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is expected to attend the summit virtually. Indonesian President Joko Widodo said President Putin would be invited to the summit despite the invasion, prompting a flurry of Western criticism. In August, he said Putin had accepted that invitation, and Mr. Zelensky had threatened to boycott the summit if President Putin attended. Ukraine is not a member of the G20 bloc. Indonesian President inspected the Apurva Kempinski Hotel in Bali, which will be the main venue of the upcoming G20 Leaders Summit. He also visited the Tahura Mangrove Hotel, where G20 leaders would also be invited to visit. Canadian Foreign Minister Melanie Joly called out an increasingly disruptive China on the world stage as she teased in a speech parts of a new Indo-Pacific strategy expected to be released this month. Take a look.
The Indo-Pacific region is the epicenter of a generational global shift. It is the fastest growing economic region of the world, responsible for almost 2/3 of global growth over the last several years. And by 2040, which is less than 2 decades from now, the region will account for more than half of the global economy, more than twice the share of the United States. At the same time, greater power competition is deepening in the region. China is an increasingly disruptive global power. It seeks to shape the global environment into one that is more permissive for interests and values that increasingly depart from ours. And China's rise as a global actor is reshaping the strategic outlook of every state in the region, including Canada.
Her comments come ahead of several summits in the region that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is to attend, including the Association of Southeast Asian Nations in Cambodia, the Group of 20 Top Economies in Indonesia, and the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC, in Thailand. Ms. Jolie said Canada must continue to deal with China on global issues such as climate change. Notably, China will chair a UN Biodiversity Conference in Montreal in December. But she promised Ottawa would be vocal on China's poor treatment of Uyghurs and other minorities, its crushing of free speech in Hong Kong, military threats against Taiwan, and any moves to curtail international navigation rights in the region. Trafficked, beaten, and locked up far from his family in China, Liu was one of thousands of people in Cambodia forced to operate online scams to line their captors' pockets. COVID shutdowns had left the builder out of work, so when he heard he could earn $2,000 a month on a construction project in Cambodia, he jumped at the chance. But he soon realized that he had been lured by a scamming gang to a compound in the seaside resort of Sihanoukville, along with hundreds of others. Take a look.
从哪里到这边下飞机就变成就被那个叫直接送到那个叫园区，到园区嘛再想跑嘛来不及了。看到那个高围墙，3米高的那个围墙，还有那个铁丝网之类的，你看到嘛肯定有点害怕的。再加上门口保安啊，什么东西都是带枪的那种。别的嘛也没啥了，基本上也没。上面现在还有那个呢，还有这个结的这个家的这个这个过程中啊，我逃跑了4次吧，啊，20天的时间。对，所以说我说的呀，3天一小挣5天一大餐了，反正就这回事儿，反正你打不死我就不想跑，我哪怕跑。
Cambodia remained relatively open as compared to the rest of the region throughout most of the pandemic period. And so you have this large number of vulnerable people with fewer opportunities to look for work abroad. And so Cambodia became a very attractive place almost overnight for some of these folks.
Particularly suddenly put their business online. So they were shifted to a whole different way of working. People didn't come to them, so they went to them. In a sense, they reversed it and went online. So that was, 2019, it was happening already, and then it really accelerated with COVID. We're seeing different types of payment systems used. We're seeing direct bank transfers used. We're seeing cryptocurrencies used. We're seeing offshored accounts and companies incorporated in different places involved. So this is very hard to track. But clearly the money being embezzled or fraudulently obtained is massive. It's in the millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars. That's why these criminals are in this business. Looking at multifaceted, multi-million-dollar businesses operating in a very complex fashion, and governments that are really reacting and don't actually have a complex law enforcement system or a law enforcement system that's ready to react very strategically. We're going to need Cambodia to take action with Thailand, Laos, Myanmar, the Philippines. Basically, the ASEAN region needs to come to terms with the fact that the conditions that criminals are looking for are basically scattered across certain parts of this region, very, very favorable to them. So let's put on the table what types of illicit activities, criminal activities are taking place there, how can we address those criminal activities holistically, strategically. If not, we're going to have them bounce around the region and just go from place to place.
香港有好多年輕人啊，就俾人呃咗去啲咁嘅集團啊，咁就係啦，咁就佢哋都係被害者嚟嘅，咁就希望你去報案咧，咁警方可以打擊呢啲咁嘅組織啦，咁啊可以將呢啲人救翻出嚟。
After months of official denials, Prime Minister Hun Sen ordered the hunt for ringleaders, and authorities launched a string of high-profile raids in August. In September, police freed more than 1,000 foreigners from 3 Sihanoukville compounds. At one site, a swoop netted nearly 9,000 mobile phones and 800 computers, and chillingly, handcuffs and electric shock instruments. And now there are fears that rather than shutting down, the groups are simply relocating. Finally, in our news, the Plate Day team took a coffee break at the first Vietnamese-inspired coffee house in Seattle to try out Coffeeholic House's bestsellers. Vietnamese coffee with a layer of salted cheese foam and purple haze, a latte for ube lovers like me. Take a look.
Hey Plate Daters, welcome back to a brand new episode of Plate Date. And today's episode, we're going to be tagging along with Rex Dulai, who's visiting one of the most popular coffee joints in all of Seattle called Coffeeholic. Let's go join him right now.
There's freezing cold mornings, then you have heat wave afternoons. Summer's fine, but it only lasts a few measly weeks in the Pacific Northwest, then it's back to the rain. So what's my favorite season in the Pacific Northwest? Fall. It's the perfect time to really enjoy a cup of great coffee. Probably one of the best out there in my hometown, Seattle's first Vietnamese-inspired coffee shop, Coffeeholic House. Coffeeholic House is the first Vietnamese-inspired coffee house in Seattle. They got their start in South Seattle in the hip, foodie-friendly neighborhood of Columbia City. Even in the midst of the pandemic, they're really strong. In a good way. Earthy, potatoey, starchy. But what's really cool about this is it's not too sweet, which I really appreciate. Alright, now this is the most popular drink. It's the Coffeeholic Dreams. Vietnamese coffee with a salted foam on top. How we're gonna conquer this. Alright, here we go. I really like that blending of the salt and the coffee and the sweetness of it. It matches, oh my gosh, so perfectly well. It's a wonderful blending. And what's this on top? Forgive me if I have foam on my mouth, but it's, when you have that saltiness and the sweetness, wonderful like merging of all these flavors, which I appreciate so much about this style of coffee. Not just like bitter and that's it, then you have to stuff sugar and cream. It's like having the bitterness, the sweetness, the saltiness, all interplay with each other to form wonderful combination. I think what I appreciate about Coffeeholic is that they embrace their Vietnamese heritage, but are willing to take culinary risks and push coffee to the next level. They're willing to experiment with unique and unexpected ingredients while still keeping the flavors robust, but they also have spectacular options if you do have a sweet tooth. It's a beautiful thing to start your morning embracing both culture and bold flavor. Was prepared from a beverage made with love, perking up my day, and I appreciate that the caffeine flowing through my veins, care, and a willingness to share cultural roots. Thank you, or in Vietnamese, Dam An An, Coffeeholic House. May your espresso machines and coffee pots keep on brewing. May your mugs be full with your fantastic concoctions any season of the year.
Rex, thank you so much. Man, those coffees look delish. Well, anyways, everybody, thank you for joining us in our episode. Until next time, we'll always save you a seat on Plate Day.
Delish indeed, especially the ube, my personal favorite. And as my usual habit, I'd like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encounter and let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. And that's it for tonight's broadcast of ASEAN in Focus. We'll see you back tomorrow. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.